Hi, you are listening to Africana Woman with Chulu. The Africana Woman is a live show that highlights our stories in our own words. We believe that to attract the lives that we truly desire, we must smash the culture of silence around the things that hold us back or keep us stuck. In our tribe, rest assured, you are not alone. The Africana Woman is for you, it's by you and about you, no matter where you are in the world. So the Africana Woman highlighted this week is Annie Mbako, who is Cameroonian born, but a UK citizen. Now let me tell you a little bit about Annie. So Annie specializes in diversity, equity, and inclusion with a particular interest in technology. She has a passion for embedding real diversity in organizations, fueled by a background in multicultural communities across 2 continents. Her current mission is to work with businesses to embed long-term and inclusive processes and operating models. Annie's accolades include the Times Top 100 Rising Star by We Are the City and the Northern Power Woman Future List. Most recently, she was named among Tech Nation's 50 most inspiring, prominent, and influential Black voices in UK Tech 2019. I cannot wait. Annie is actually such a dear friend. And we have known each other for close to 20 years. So we can definitely talk, y'all. But our topic today is Brit-ish. Ish in brackets. So British Africans, newcomers to the game. Listen, this conversation was so good. We had to make it into 2 parts. So please enjoy the first part of our discussion. Let's get started.
Hi. Hello.
Hey. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm good. This week has been challenging, but I'm good. So, Annie, you are in the UK, hence the topic, British Africans. Tell us how you found yourself in Britain.
So I came here because of my parents, specifically my dad. He was studying over here. My mom was with me and my brothers in Cameroon. That's where we're from. And they just wanted to join the family together, probably, try and give us a better life, look for more education opportunities, more opportunities in general. So we ended up moving to North Wales in 1994. And that's where my parents have been since, really. My dad was lucky enough to get a job, and my mom found work soon after then. And so I've spent a good chunk of most of my teenage years and a good chunk of my youth in North Wales. And and I'm now in Manchester, and that's the bulk of my upbringing, my everyday, but I still consider myself very much Cameroonian. It was Cameroon at home and Wales or England outside the house. So that's how I arrived in the UK. So I've been here for a very long time and seen things. Also being stationed in Wales, it's very different from being in England, which a lot of people don't know. The UK is made up of several different countries, and England is slightly different from Scotland, and that's slightly different from Northern Ireland, and that's very different also from Wales. We have different rules, different ways of doing things. The mixture in the population is very different as well. And the education system as well is different. So, all of my opinions, I would say, are not typical, because most Black people who come to the UK even today, they don't end up in Wales. So I have a very nuanced view. Mama saying, say something in a Mancunian accent. Well, apparently when I speak, I have a Mancunian twang already. It's not quite often British. I can't really, hi, Natalie Claire. This is, Oh, cool. So
I think there's been different types of Africans who are in the UK, I would think. There are Africans who went to the UK, like yourself, as young children. And then there's also those that went in a later stage in life, probably, let's say, to study or to find a job. And then there is the first generation Africans as well. And I imagine the experiences are quite diverse.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So just take us a little bit back into how Africans found themselves on the British Isles.
Yeah. So as everyone or most people are aware, a lot of all the English-speaking African countries, or a lot of us are part of the Commonwealth. So I would say that the years and years and years ago, it wasn't actually that difficult to get to the UK. So I think from what I've seen, the people that took advantage really were Nigerians, Ghanaians, South Africans, Zimbabweans. A lot of these places, you didn't even need a visa to come to the UK because you were considered pretty much British. That's how the first Black population came and settled here from the Caribbean. But with the Africans, it was a similar story. What I've seen, and I was quite surprised when I came to the UK because I assumed that we Africans had as deep roots in the UK, just as Caribbeans did, maybe not in as many numbers, but a lot of us seem to have come here, had children, say from in the 70s and 80s, a lot of people came here, had children just to get the passport. And we actually sent our children back home to do schooling. And I know why that is. We always think that our school system in Africa is superior in some ways. And it is, to be fair. Having been somewhat experiencing both systems of education, our education is superior. So I know a lot of Ghanaians and Nigerians who they were born here. I didn't even know they were born here. They have the passports and all the privilege that comes with the passport, but they only jumped in either at just before they were about to turn 18. So they did A-levels here, or they came back when they were younger. So the population, or African population in general in the UK, tends to be very well educated. We didn't really come over on specific vocational visas, should we say, or for vocational reasons. And we seem to be, in general, well, from what we're hearing from researchers, the most educated side of the Black community. But the longer that people have been here, we have seen, differences. So people like myself who came when I was a child, or someone who comes here when they're an adult or almost an adult, they've still got a very, very strong affiliation with their home country. Sometimes people like myself, I don't even consider myself British. Yes, I have the passport, and yes, I have the accent, and my life is here, but I've considered myself Cameroonian first, always. And that's how I will always be. And, we were brought here because the passport, quite frankly, it's a privilege and it's an advantage to have that passport. And I wouldn't want to have it any other way. But in my heart, I feel Cameroonian first. And I'm still honestly say I'm still, even in my 30s, still trying to understand what being British is, because I know what it is to be adopted Welsh. But I didn't know or didn't realize that England was so different until I started living here as well. And it was just a revelation to
tell us some of the things that are different. What's different?
So the population, in terms of the Black population in Wales, we tend to be a lot more mixed, as in intermarriage. There were a lot more mixed race children from first and second generation. Obviously, there are fewer of us as well, so we tend to be comfortable or confident in swimming around in circles where we'll be the only Black people. And I know it's different from England, because England's a bigger country, and let's face it, most of the economics for the UK happens in England. So we don't really have, well, maybe with the exception of Cardiff, which is the capital of Wales, we don't really have clusters where there are large communities of Africans. That's not really happened yet. It is starting to happen in the larger cities, but there wasn't ever that kind of thing. So it was always, that's why I said in the beginning, it was Wales when we left the house and Cameroon when we were inside the house. And for most people, whether they were fully Black or not, that's exactly how life was. There wasn't any, for example, we live near the border of England, so we're very lucky. Manchester is only 45 minutes drive away from Wrexham, and we would always come to Manchester to buy African food, to cut our hair, to do our hair. We had to leave Wales in order to do that. Luckily these days, I know that in Wrexham and in Cardiff and Swansea, big cities in Wales, those, you know, whether it's the food or whether it's something cultural that you need, those activities are there. So you don't have to travel to England to do them anymore, or to do as many of them. But I would say also the open racism in England and Wales, as far as I've experienced it, there's a lot more open racism in England, or there used to be. I'm sure that it was Wales exactly more accepting, but because there weren't clusters until recently, there haven't been clusters of large communities of Black people. I don't know, maybe Welsh people didn't really feel threatened, and the conversation about race would have started on a different footing because they knew, and even these days, they know that they are the majority and it's still their country. There was never any chance of having, a street or a corner that was African or, Chinese always have their Chinatown and that's always acceptable. But yeah, there was really never any threat. But also in the way that the systems are run, like for example, with healthcare in Wales, you don't pay for basic medicines, when in England you do. So you've got to be quite wealthy if you're going to be sick. As much as there is the NHS there, that costs a lot of money. We don't have that thing in Wales. And in Wales as well, I remember before the expensive university fees came on, I could actually apply for funding to pay for my university. You can't do that in England unless you prove that your parents can't pay. But in Wales, it was possible to do. And I know in Scotland as well, it's possible to do. So there are subtle differences, and it's because of the way that the government is run in Wales, because the country's smaller and they generally have a mindset of looking after their own people, I think a lot more than England. And I think that might be one of the reasons why my parents never moved from Wales.
Okay. So I have a question for you from Muma. She says, how do you say this experience shaped your view of yourself? So I would say from moving from Cameroon and then coming to Wales and eventually now living in Manchester.
Yeah. So when we first came over, I was so excited. So let me explain. I think most people who are on the call will know, but the feeling of when you leave from most places in Africa to come to somewhere like the UK, you are so excited because it's painted as the pinnacle of the world, the best thing that can ever happen to you. And, even I remember my first day of school, just the massive difference between coming from a classroom where our classrooms in Cameroon were just made of concrete walls, brown walls, and the chalkboard, and that was it. And then we had wooden benches. And then you come to a class where you're sitting in a round table. You're not all facing the teacher. There are 4 of you on a table. There are pictures and paintings on the wall. The wall is colourful. You've got plants. You've got computers, all sorts of things. And yeah, it was absolutely amazing. So for the first few years, I would say certainly adjusting into primary school, also because of the experience that we had, the care that the teachers and the church took for us, because we went to a Catholic school and it was attached to a Catholic church. They actually did a great job of trying to integrate us, trying to welcome us and give us a tour before we actually started school. I remember I was quite nervous leaving my brother, who's the closest in age to me, leaving him because the school buildings, our school buildings, when we went, they were not in the same building. They were across the playground. So I was physically not in the same building as him for the first year, maybe the first and second year that I was there as well. So that was nerve-wracking. But I think the school did an amazing job, or as much as they could, in taking care of us. And I it's not to say that I didn't feel out of place. I definitely did, because we were the only Black children in the school. There were 2 other Indian girls there. And I think that pretty much was it in terms of diversity. Everyone else was white. We did feel it, but because everyone had tried to make us feel so welcome, we blended in. We tried to, they made us feel as Welsh as possible while still honouring our African heritage.
Annie, did you ever feel like you had to change yourself? Feel the pressure to look like everybody else and do what other people are doing? I don't know, when you have your break, maybe your food was different from the other kids. I don't know.
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of food, I don't know if my parents purposefully did this, but we didn't. You had a choice of whether to bring in lunch or to eat lunch made for you in school. And I remember for a very long time, we had to eat the lunch that was there. So my parents are the kind of people that will try and get you used to different, even in Cameroon, we were used to different types of food, different types of people. And so maybe that was done on purpose, or maybe they couldn't be bothered to do packed lunches. But certainly in terms of, what I wore, my hair, eventually, yes, over the years, I felt pressure. That particularly became apparent, especially in high school, where there's already pressure anyway, peer pressure to look a certain way. And I remember that caused quite a few problems with my parents, because as African parents, they weren't really au fait with the program of how, white British young children behave, the way that they dress, the way that they talk, etc., etc. So, that was a bit of hell for me, because I had to definitely do one thing in school, and at home, I just had to tone it down, because I remember, my mum particularly, she did not hold back in terms of telling me, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, it's not happening, not in my house. Those are the kind of words that she used, but I think that's typical of most African parents when they come over. They didn't want, their daughters straying away from doing well in school, and anything that is seen as a trend sometimes at home can be seen as a threat to, the stability of your grades and how you're perceived. And I think as well, now that I think back at it, my parents did experience some slight racism and microaggressions at work. They always did. They never told us about it. But I think part of their fear in letting us roam around, in a town where most of the time we were pretty much the only Black people that we ever saw most of the time that I was there. They were trying to just cocoon us from the pain that they had experienced at work. But I didn't know that. All I thought was, my parents are trying to restrict me. And that resulted in me, luckily with some of my friends and my mum's friends, they would vouch for me, and we would, go to places that other teenagers would go, but there was no way that I was ever going to go there if I told my parents the truth. It's not to say that I did anything particularly bad. I was a goody two-shoes, apparently, now that I look back on it. But even just simple things like sleeping over at someone's house. Oh gosh, like that was an ordeal that took a lot of negotiation. Even having dinner at someone's house after school. I know it's a big problem still with a lot of African parents who've just moved to the UK, because it's not really something that we do, and they're quite wary of things, either habits that we will pick up or how we'll be treated in other people's housing. So it's awkward when you're a teenager and you're trying to be. I didn't even want to be cool. I just wanted to fit in, and that's how you make friends. You do sleepovers. You go over to their house. They come over to yours, and it took my parents quite some time to really understand how it all works and that it was normal and it's okay. But yeah, their first reactions to it were always, this is my house, these are my rules. We don't do things like this in Africa. You don't see any of your cousins doing this. So, you know, it's not acceptable. No, bye. There was no negotiation, no discussion.
Well, Natalie has commented. She says, you become a pro negotiator with the sleepover plan. Weeks in advance, strategy begins. I like that.
Hey sis, thank you for listening to Africana Woman with Chulu. This show is only possible because of your participation. These are your stories in your own words. There are actually 2 ways that you can be featured in the Africana Woman Network. You can either be a guest blogger on the Africana Woman blog or a guest speaker on the Africana Woman podcast. If any of these interest you, please contact me on africanawoman@gmail.com to learn more about the procedures to be approved. Now, back to the show.
Yeah. So on the same tone, in terms, like you've got this, you said this concept of, you know, you're British on outside of the house, but then you're African on the inside of the house. Now, how long do you think that that stays intact in the next generations coming down?
Oh, it doesn't. It cannot. And certainly for me, for my children, it will not. And not because I don't want it to, but I can see. So my brother, I have a brother who I think he was about 2 when we came. So he's pretty much a baby. And growing up in Wales is all that he's ever known. You can see a stark difference between him and me and my other brother who came here when we were 8, which, by the way, when you're 8 in Africa, it means that you can pretty much look after yourself. We could do most domestic chores by ourselves. There's a massive difference. You have a looser grip on your original culture, and it doesn't matter how much of the language your parents try to teach you, how many times they take you there on holiday. Yes, you may still feel a close affinity with the African culture, but you will feel a stronger affinity with being British. And also, there's a bigger and stronger Black population in the UK now, which there wasn't. And there's social media and the internet as well, which makes you feel closer to the Black people here. So there's a whole host of different people who are at different stages that you can relate to a lot more. I mean, I didn't have a mobile phone until I was 17. And even then I shared it with my brother. So, you know, can you imagine that? And there's a massive difference between that and a 10-year-old, because some 10-year-olds have iPhones now and they can, you know, speak to their peers or their cousins or whoever. The communication just wasn't there. So I think the experience will be different because there's a stronger sense of what it is to be Black and British. There are different versions of it, but at least people they're more together right now. So yeah, I definitely don't think that it definitely, from what I can see anyway, of people as well who've pretty much been born here, grown up here with African parents. I know that they're definitely different from me in varying degrees, but yeah, there's a huge difference. Because my parents never let me forget that, you know, we came from Cameroon, and that's why I always present myself in most places, unless there's an advantage to telling people that I'm British or from Manchester or from Wales. I always present myself as Cameroonian first, because I'm like, it doesn't matter what you do to me. I've had it ingrained in my brain that that's where I'm from. That's my home. So you can do what you like, but it's home to me.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about British Africans. What makes them ish?
With some people, that's more referring to maybe people like me. And I think the society still, there's a lot of people who still see us as other, that we're not quite British, we're not quite there. I think that's contributed to me hanging on to my Cameroonian identity as well, because there are subtle ways that people have, you know, made it clear that I'm not British. And I'm sure even people who are born here with parents who are from Africa, they get made to feel that way. In the recent civil rights activities that's happened, or Black Lives Matter and everything, people have researched a conversation about microaggressions, and a lot of people have been burying things. But when I'm talking to people and seeing, what they're seeing, and then they go back and they realize, actually, I felt awkward in this position, and it was because I was subtly reminded that I'm not from here yet. And it's almost as if it's not even good enough that you are born here. For some people, that you're born here because you've got African parents, it's as if you have to like cleanse the Africanness out of yourself, and then the next generation. So it worries me that, the next generation, will they be good enough to be British? We're never good enough. And that British with brackets around the ish, it's the title of a book, actually. A lady called Afro Hirsch, and she's half Ghanaian and half, well, it's really German, but British. And yeah, she delves a lot into the history, and even her for herself, even though she's born here and she's, one of her parents is really British, she still feels out of place. So, it's no wonder there's a lot of people who are kind of feeling out of place. And even if they assert themselves, they can show for the last 40 years their heritage in this country, or their lineage of their entire family in this country, they're still made to feel as if they don't belong. And that's why I'm British at the end.
So what do you think are the coping mechanisms, of people that find themselves in that situation where, you've been born in Britain, yes, you've got African parents, but, you're being made to feel or that you are not from that country? How do you see people's coping mechanisms? How does it come out?
So a lot of people, I know that there's certain congregation with Black people just to ground yourself and calm yourself. It really helps a lot. It definitely helps me. And I think that is a reason as well why we see the church or churches in UK that are full of young people, old people all over the place. I think it's a place where we can go and
African people. Like the churches are full of African people. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there are, churches that the congregation specifically is targeted toward African people. A lot of people gather, and, being together with your own people, whichever way that you do it, it does ground you, and it reassures you, gives you quite a lot of strength as well. And it's really, really important. In my circles that I either work with or socialize with, sometimes there's been times in my life where I didn't have that many Black people, or the Black people were really mainly like family and longtime friends. So I wasn't necessarily seeing people every day. But even for myself, I've started going to this walking group recently, and it is just for Black women. And just the act of being with them for a few hours on a random Sunday and not having to worry about what you say or what your hair looks like or how you do things, and even joking in a way that I used to think, it's just an African way. Maybe it's something that's been preserved over time. The group is full of African and Caribbean ladies, but the way that we even tell jokes, the way that we make fun of each other, it's completely different in a way that I wouldn't do it if the group was, full of a lot of white people. I wouldn't. I think being together, that's like one of the most important things that we need to keep doing. Mm-hmm. And even if you live in an area where there aren't that many Black people, like my parents did, we always went to London. We went to London every month. They have friends in Manchester. Manchester's also got a big Black population. And with other cities, they always go to events and stay in touch with people, because you just need that kind of grounding that only, your own people can give you. And that happens, to every race that's a minority in an area. There is no way, I don't think now, people have not cracked a way of giving you that sense of comfort and and grounding that your own people can give you. But the other way that people, it's not really coping. I don't call it coping, but people tend to put things in their back pocket as well. I'm talking about these microaggressions, whether we realize them or not. When things happen and they make us feel uncomfortable, you have to decide at that point whether you're going to fight, whether you're going to speak up or not, because it has a knock-on effect on your activity, your stability, and it's usually to do with work. The perception that people have of you. And I've seen a lot of people who are successful, they pack a lot of things away and tend to deal with them away, privately in blocks of time. But psychologically, obviously, that is not great, because as we've seen with this incident happening in America and the stirring up of Black Lives Matter, a lot of people haven't been able to cope psychologically with what's happened because they've got so much in their back pocket. With this one, they can't put it in the back pocket because it's too full.
Yeah. But Annie, do you think, you said that people, they experience microaggressions, they put it away and then they deal with it later. But do you think they're actually dealing with it? Especially coming from a culture where Africans are like, me, psychology, like me, go to a therapist, like...
Yeah, it is, and that's the problem, because it's not been dealt with properly. People, we don't do therapy. Therapy is a new thing, which I would say maybe the under 35s are looking at it, considering it, but in the over 35s, I'm not sure if my parents would ever go to therapy, even though they both work in medical fields. It's so important. I think what this recent crisis has shown is that act of packing stuff away in the back pocket, it doesn't work. I've seen people who I thought were my rock, and they've told me that they've spent the first 2 weeks when George Floyd was killed rolling on their floors crying. That is not the mark of someone who's dealt with it. So we need to, you've got a great point there. This is one of the things of, while our population grows here, and when we come here, we need to start picking up some habits that are commonplace in the UK for our own good, and going to therapy. It's not even great within the white population, but just going to therapy full stop. It's got to be a habit. Talking to people about things, it's got to be a habit. We've got to start doing it. We can't just do things the African way, pack it and, carry on because things are better. We've got it better than everyone else. It's like, no, you will not be able to be the rock for your family or thrive really and truly if you don't deal with those things. That's the reality of it, because somehow, somewhere, that bubble's going to burst one day, and you need to be in control of when the bubble bursts and how it bursts, and, make sure that it doesn't destroy everything that you've worked for. I've seen a lot of people, and I don't blame them, but online lately, because they've let that bubble burst in an uncontrolled manner, in a place that isn't safe for them, quite frankly, they've kind of ruined their chances for themselves. And it's difficult, because expressing yourself should never ruin your chances, ideally, but we're human. And one thing that we need to remember is that because we're not the majority in this country, someone said something to me, we're not the majority in this country, we're not in the director's box, we are guests at the table. Whether you want it to be real or not, that's a fact. We are guests in the table. So when we're releasing our emotions, when we're talking to people, when we're addressing things, we do still need to be mindful of where is a safe space to do it, so there's no repercussions. Or if you're going to have, risk of repercussions, be ready to deal with it. So I feel for people. It's so difficult. It is really, really difficult. And also because I'm always usually calm. I don't usually lose my temper very quickly. So that's been the most difficult part for me during this period, is trying to help people find a safe outlet for them and carry on focusing on the positives and doing the best that they can and changing things that they can, because there's a lot of things that we can't change. And we can cry about them for fun.
Straight away, but we can work to change it.
Yes. And there's some people, some people have got resources they can make massive changes. They're near the top. But for some people, if you're at the bottom of the chain, you need to be realistic about what you can do and what you can't do, and the consequences of what you really, 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 what can actually happen.
So because you work in the digital space, just give us an example of what you would recommend not to do on a digital space, and what would be a safe space to go and vent or let out your frustrations.
Yeah. So something I've seen, particularly on LinkedIn, and it's because of the kind of platform that it's on. So LinkedIn, it's generally very professional still, although it's getting more casual. People are sharing personal things on there. But I have seen quite a few posts where people, they're venting, but they're also attacking their clients and potential customers, and saying that, people don't care on the space. I don't think that is helpful. And using social media to vent as well, you've got to be aware of, who's your audience on that platform. You don't want to be, if you're someone that relies on, your clients or your I don't know, your peers or whatever, they're mainly white, you're in a mainly white industry, you've got to be careful. There are ways to put your frustration across or say how you feel without attacking people that might be on your side or they might be on the fence. And if they see, things that you post and they feel that it's an attack, there's no way to have a conversation online on LinkedIn. It's very different from posting something on Facebook where it's just all your friends, or maybe on Instagram where it's just your friends and your family, and you've got time to really explain things. So yeah, people have to be just a bit careful in where they post the certain things and how they address it, because there's always a way to address something in a level-headed way. And I think sometimes it is better just to take 5 minutes to breathe, and not say anything initially than immediately. But in terms of, in the digital space, it's always good to, and it's difficult, but it's always good to address people who actually know you and who you know directly. So there have been a lot of conversations that have happened in people's direct messages or private messages, and it leads to a video call. That's always the best way, because a lot of people in the UK, especially white people, they weren't aware that there was still racism going on. They didn't understand what racism really was. And in order for them to understand, they need a full story and a full picture from you. And you can't give that in a post. Some people are able to give that in a video, a long video that they recorded. And I've seen that being done really well. But those people are skilled at communicating. Most of us are not like that. So I would definitely recommend, if anybody, you still, because there's still a lot of tension going on, if you can start having conversations with people, direct messages, and try and get them onto a phone call where you can actually have a conversation, it's always the best way. Don't do things on social media, and especially don't post something if you're not ready for potential backlash or argument or back and forth. If you're going to get frustrated by that, don't do it. It's always best to, I've seen a lot of people come off social media completely, which, I'd advise, if that's what's going to work for your mental health, do it and get away from the craziness, but don't get involved into things that you can't handle, because social media can be a difficult landscape to navigate anyway. But already with this sensitive issue, if you're really not ready for a fight psychologically, don't start one, because the fact of the matter is, if you're Black, you're still going to experience racism probably for the rest of our lives, I'm sorry to say. So those people that you're arguing with, if they don't understand what racism is, they don't experience it, they just stop at that fight. But the fight that you have, it stays in your head, and the anger eats away at you. So you have to be selfish, I say. You have to be selfish and think about yourself and what's best for you, because you still have to carry on, and you still have to pay the bills or go to school or do whatever. So after yourself.
I told you it would be good. Didn't I tell you this would be a good conversation with Annie? So these are my 3 top takeaways. 1, it is so important that if you move to another country of the continent, please maintain connections as a minority group. And number 2, we go there and we have, children, but the next generation down have a looser connection with our countries of origin. And it's very hard to maintain it, but, you do what you can. Number 3, we are British. That term is because there are still people who treat British Africans as others. Basically, they are still guests at the table. So guys, like I said, this was just part 1 of the conversation. There is going to be a part 2, so you need to make sure that you join us next week. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for tuning into Africana Woman for another week. It's so amazing that you're here. I really do appreciate your time. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Snitcher, Pandora, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. Click the subscribe button. You will be helping us so much if you first subscribed, gave us a 5-star rating, and then reviewed the podcast. We love to know what you thought about the episode, or even what do you want to have us talk about in the future. So I also love to connect with you, so find me on all social media at Chulu by Design, or come on over to the Africana Woman Tribe, which is a Facebook group, and we can dive deeper into this topic. So see you next week for part 2 of this conversation. Remember, my hope is that you love yourself, flaws and all, and attract the life that you desire. This has been a production of Ulendo Creative Media. You can find out more about their services on www.ulendocreative.com.